What if I told you the decades long struggle between pursuing long term growth and achieving short term sales is rooted in a myth, and going broad for the brand and targeted for performance is wrong? According to new research from TransUnion and MMA Global, you can achieve your short term goals without sacrificing long term sustainable growth with a single audience strategy by focusing on the group of consumers most receptive to your advertising, your brand's movable middles. Don't waste another dollar on audiences who won't respond to your ads. To learn more, download TransUnion's new white paper at transunion.com/mm.
Hello, I'm John Dioso, editor of Ad Age Studio 30. Welcome to a special edition of the Marketer's Brief podcast. Today, we'll be talking about a fresh data-driven approach to audience targeting with Marc Vermut, Vice President of the Marketing Solutions Knowledge Lab at TransUnion. TransUnion's research conducted with MMA Global has highlighted a key audience segment they call movable middles. This new strategy has been shown to boost campaign ROI by up to 80% and drive both short-term sales and long-term growth. Here's my conversation with Marc. Hi, Marc. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, John. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, it's great to have you here. All right, to start us off, could you explain what movable middles means in the context of audience targeting, and how does this concept differ from traditional audience segmentation?
Okay, I'm going to take the second part first and the first part second.
Do it.
Okay, so when we think about audience targeting, and segmentation may be part of it in terms of how do you decide what consumers or which consumers you want to talk to, brands traditionally use a wide range of different types of definitions of the audiences they want to talk to. It may just be broad reach. We want to talk to everyone, maybe everyone who's potentially a category buyer, whether or not they may be interested in my brand. They may focus on demographics, especially, historic TV buying, 25 to 44 male. They may want to talk to their customers, or they may not want to talk to their customers and talk to everyone who isn't their customers. They may focus on a buyer heaviness model. Like maybe we want to target just our heavy users to make sure they stay with us, or we don't want to talk about our heavy users and we want to talk to our light and medium users because we want to make sure they keep coming back to us. The movable middles is a little bit different in the sense that it's really an outcome-based targeting strategy where the focus is getting the most out of your marketing investment dollars from a financial perspective. Whether it's today or tomorrow, it's the growth of the business. Whether it's growing your brand, it's growing your sales, it's growing your customer acquisitions, and it's identifying the audience where you are going to get the greatest ROI out of that. It's not the greatest reach. It's not the most amount of impressions in a campaign. It's finding the audiences that in aggregate are going to be more responsive to your ads. So for the 10 million impressions that go out there, you're going to get way more households or individuals converting, buying you, downloading an app than you would with any other strategy of selecting consumers. And the difference of the movable middles is how you identify those consumers.
Right. So what makes this middle group so responsive, and why does targeting them generate strong ROI?
What makes them most responsive is sort of the underlying concept of marketing incrementality and consumer responsiveness to marketing messages. It started about, I think, 5 years ago at this point when we started to have conversations with MMA Global. They're a marketing industry trade org that's really focused on making CMOs the best data-driven marketers they could be by sharing best practices and practical tools that they can use to further the performance of the marketing strategy that they build and execute. And we started working with them to demonstrate that user level measurement was still a thing, marketing attribution, and that there are great audience and message and campaign insights that you could get from that you can't necessarily get from marketing mix models, the aggregate strategic models that a lot of brands use in order to measure and optimize their overall marketing plan. And we built a synthetic data set basically like agent-based modeling, where we took actual sales data, we took actual marketing availability, like where consumers tend to show up, the type of media that they tend to show up for, actual observed consumer marketing responsiveness, to build this giant data set that was representative of the US population. And we went out and we said, okay, great, let's market into that population and let's see how they convert. And then let's understand who really responded more to marketing or not. And what it comes back down to, what we discovered, is that the relationship between the likelihood for a consumer to choose your brand next had a direct relationship to their responsiveness to your marketing. Consumer responsiveness at an individual level is like an S curve, right? At the bottom, you're not really going to respond to a brand's messaging. You may not even pay attention to it. Your likelihood of buying is between 0 to 20%. You're probably not even considering this brand in your mental shelf. And then far out on the right end is also a very flat side of the curve. And these are like your high loyals. These are consumers who almost always choose you, right? Maybe there's one other brand, but the amount of advertising you need to break through with their patterns of behavior is really significant, right? The movable middles is that section in between, 20 to 80% likely to choose your brand next, your product next. It's a really steep part of the curve, right? So high incremental response to marketing, and they're considering you and a few other brands. They bought from you, they'll continue to buy from you, but they also consider some other brands. So by focusing on those consumers who are most open to hearing and responding to your marketing, your dollars are going to go furthest, right? Because they're going to attend to the marketing that you put in front of them. And that's what we discovered in the research that we did in our first Movables white paper. We worked with Vaz Bakopoulos and Joel Rubinson from MMA Global to really formulate and validate this. And we'll talk about, but we wanted then to understand, well, it makes sense in a research analysis. Does it really happen in the wild? Does this concept really scale?
Right. I mean, in an era where performance is stressed so much right now in the marketing world, it really does sound like movable middles does support long-term growth too. So could you share some insights on how movable middles does support longer-term growth?
Well, that's the greatest question, right? We're in an era where marketing dollars are under a lot of pressure, and CMOs have to validate and show to the CFOs that they work with that the capital, the corporate capital they get to market is actually yielding return. And from the analysis that we've done, we had shown that in the short term, it drove performance. But then the question becomes, am I focusing on people who are going to drive my business today at the expense of not talking to the consumers that I need to become my customers and to purchase from me ongoing in the future? And so we were really fortunate. We did another really groundbreaking, innovative project with MMA Global and Ally Bank. It's a digital online only bank that has always been very forward in leveraging brand messaging. And we worked with these two partners to do a project called Brand is Performance, where we effectively ran an experiment at scale against audiences. TransUnion has an online offline identity graph that's really robust and it's persistent and it covers most of the United States. So we were able to run an experiment where we exposed some households to advertising, some households were suppressed from it, and it was a mix of brand messaging and performance messaging. And we ran the campaign for 10 weeks, and then we observed how consumers responded in the first 3 months. But because of the strength and the robustness and the persistence of our identity graph, we were able to look forward 18 months in time to see what the continued impact of doing marketing today had for the business on their performance tomorrow. And we got tremendous amounts of insights, but it was from this study that we were able to see if the movable middles did perform well, not just in the short term, but also in the long term. And what we found is you're targeting an audience. The way that you identify the movable middles is either through actual observed category buying behavior, because you need to know, have they been buying your brand and other brands, at what frequency, at what share of wallet, or you can use surveys to identify the likelihood of selecting your brand or your product, which is what we did in the case of Ally Bank. So you can't just target those known users. It's too small of a universe. It's leveraging those insights to scale up to what you know about consumers overall in the aggregate to build audiences that were rich in movable middles. And so what we found was by talking to movable middle consumers today, audiences that are rich in movable middles and people who look like that, then 18 months out, you still had stronger responsiveness to marketing. You're priming these consumers, you're filling the upper funnel so that they're ready to receive and pay attention to the ads that you're sharing.
All right, well, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor.
For today's marketers, efficiency is the name of the game. But maximizing the impact of your marketing budget with a movable middles audience isn't just a theory, it's a proven fact. Based on findings from TransUnion and MMA Global, nearly a dozen brands, from consumer packaged goods to banking, boosted their ROAS by up to 23 times when they targeted movable middles, outperforming every other commonly used audience strategy. To explore how movable middles can help you make the most of your ad dollars, download TransUnion's new white paper at transunion.com/mm.
And we're back. So, Marc, before we took a break, you shared a really great example about Ally Bank and movable middles. Could you share any other success stories that demonstrate how movable middles play out in the real world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the really terrific thing about partnering with MMA Global and their focus on supporting CMOs is they actively go out to work with brands to demonstrate that the theories and the research that they do actually has the impact that they expected. And so MMA Global has been able to demonstrate with a number of CPG and retail brands, including Campbell's, Kroger, CVS, Reckitt, that movable middle consumers respond to marketing between 2 times and 23 times as much as an average consumer. Now, that relates to how large your market share is. The larger your market share, the more movable middle consumers you have, the closer the response of a movable middle is to an average consumer. But the really important thing they were able to demonstrate is when they looked at the campaigns that were run, when these advertisers ran campaigns that were richer in targeting movable middle audiences, they saw a campaign performance improvement of between 20% and 80%. I mean, it's outstanding the ability to drive increased performance of your marketing investments by making sure you're talking to the right people and that you have a mechanism by which to determine that. In Ally Bank's case, as I mentioned before the break, it wasn't just the short-term performance, but validating that talking to these consumers doesn't mortgage the long-term performance of your brand. So now we know that it works. It works out there for a number of different brands, not just in the short term, but also in the long term, which can also simplify your audience targeting strategy. It makes all of those myriad of choices you might make a lot easier to dissect because you have a strategic framework to align against.
Right. Okay. And before we wrap up, what would you say is the biggest takeaway for marketers who are interested in movable middles?
I think it's that you don't have to talk to everybody and that there is a systematic way to identify which consumers you should talk to for your paid marketing. You're going to make lots of different decisions about who your best customers are and how you design the products and price and bundle those products for them and where you're going to distribute it. But for the marketing investment dollars you have, you can now have confidence that if you leverage a data-driven approach like the movable middles, you're going to have a really happy CFO because you're going to be able to demonstrate the improvement in your investment dollars. And for me, it's just data-driven marketing, using data to make informed decisions to just do better.
Happy CFO. I mean, I wish I could come up with something clever to say there about happy wife, happy life, but maybe you can, Marc.
No, I was a CFO, so that's why this matters so much to me. It's empowering marketers to speak in the language of the people who guide the budgets and dollars of the companies that they're growing.
All right. Well, we're out of time. Marc, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing these insights.
Thank you so much. This was great.
That was Marc Vermut, Vice President of the Marketing Solutions Knowledge Lab at TransUnion. I'm John Dioso, editor of Ad Age Studio 30. I'd like to thank our producer, Lauren Ciardio, and invite you to subscribe to the Marketer's Brief podcast on your favorite player. We promise to keep it brief or at least short enough for your morning coffee. Thanks for tuning in.
Marketers Brief listeners get $40 off an adage.com subscription. Sharpen your marketing edge and visit adage.com/brief for your discount.